Hello students, in the last video we had discussed the black body problem and the resolution of the problem by Max Planck by these two revolutionary, perhaps the most important assumptions in the history of physics. And it is very hard to overstate the importance of these assumptions, and let me tell you once again, because this is very important as far as quantum mechanics is concerned. Classically, energy, the oscillator energy could have been anywhere between 0 and infinity. There was no bounds on that. And what this first assumption made was, it said that the energies cannot come in a continuous way from 0 to infinity. It actually comes in chunks, it comes in packets. And what are those energies? It is E is equal to nh nu. It could be 1h nu, 2h nu, 3h nu, and nothing in between. And quantum is the name of that packet. That's why this is called quantum physics. This very important assumption gave this name to the subject, because energy is quantized in this scheme of physics, which was not there earlier. That is why it is very important to understand energy comes in chunks, and this became the feature of quantum physics. Many things in quantum physics are quantized. They cannot take on continuous values. They come in packets, they come in chunks, they come in quanta. That's why this is called as quantum physics. So finally, by these two assumptions, he could derive this relation, which perfectly matched with the experimental data, and this is how the black body radiation spectrum or black body spectrum was completely solved. One unified description for the black body spectrum. And then, as the days passed by, in 1905, later Einstein used the same hypothesis to in his monumental work, for which he got Nobel. By the way, Planck also got Nobel Prize for this work, for having a unified description, giving a unified description of black body radiation. Later in 1905, Einstein authored 5 papers, one of which is called photoelectric effect, and he used this same quantum Planck's hypothesis, and he not only used it, he extended this actually. So what he actually said was, not just the oscillators, even the radiation is quantized. If you consider radiation to be consisting of photons, each photon comes with an energy E is equal to h nu. This E is equal to h nu, together with the other famous equation of special theory of relativity in 1905, E is equal to mc square, became the symbols of two great revolutions, namely quantum physics and special theory of relativity in 20th century. So this is how it was done. Now, in the year 1911, Rutherford discovers using his Rutherford discovers that positive center, which we now call as nucleus, by his famous alpha scattering experiment. And we know that all atom as a whole is neutral. Our electrons were already known, right? So atom as a whole is neutral. So if you want to make the atom neutral, there is only one way. You must have equal number of positive charges and negative charges. That is how you can make the whole atom neutral. Now the question was, what is the structure? What is the structure of this atom? That was the next question which had to be answered. So many models were proposed. Many models were proposed, and Rutherford himself gave a model in which this is the positive core. There were no neutrons, because neutrons were not neutrons were discovered only later, but there was a positive core, which we now call as nucleus. You can see here electrons are swirling around. So the number of negative charges, if it gets completely balanced by the positive charges which are there in the positive core, they will get balanced, they will get cancelled each other as far as charge is concerned, and that renders the atom neutral. This was the idea. And this suffered from a major lapse. This suffered from a major conceptual problem, that is this, that has to do with electrodynamics. What is that problem? Unlike planets which are revolving around the sun, this is not just a mass. Suppose that these electrons are spiraling around the nucleus. If it only has mass, no problem, but it has also charge. And what are the laws of electrodynamics? The laws of electrodynamics says any accelerated charge should produce radiation, and when it produces radiation, it should lose energy, because radiation is a form of energy, so it should lose energy and finally spiral down to the nucleus. Now the question was, we know experimentally that atoms are stable, but if you go with this picture, if you go with this structure of the atom, the electrons will not last long and they will spiral into the nucleus. That will make the atom completely unstable. How do you explain this atomic structure was the question, because please remember, what is acceleration? Any acceleration is rate of change of velocity, it is v by t. But remember, v is a vector, it has magnitude and direction. In circle, even though you are keeping the speed constant, every point the direction is changing. So any circular motion is an accelerated motion in that way. So law of electrodynamics says any accelerated charge should radiate energy and finally it should spiral down to the nucleus. So this was the conceptual problem. To counter this conceptual problem, Niels Bohr in 1913 proposed a model in which he said this: electrons spiral around the nucleus only in few allowed orbits, and these are very special orbits. He called these orbits as stationary states. And what is the speciality of these stationary states? He said, the speciality of these stationary states are, even though electrons are revolving around this, they are performing an accelerated motion, they don't radiate any energy. This is what was his postulate. So this was very successful model, and when he did so, he applied the quantum hypothesis. That means not every orbit around the nucleus is allowed, only few orbits are allowed. This is n is equal to 1, n is equal to 2, n is equal to 3. Once again, the levels are quantized, right? So once again he used the quantization hypothesis to explain this atom, and this is what explained the spectroscopic lines, and he got Nobel Prize for this work. But the problem was, the question still remained, what is so special with those stationary orbits which will make electrons, even though it is performing a accelerated motion, not to radiate energy? And a resolution came quite unexpectedly, and the resolution was had to do with waves. And the resolution was, see, this is the Bohr's atom. Okay, only few orbits are allowed. These are called stationary states. Now the problem of acceleration comes only when a particle is moving. So the resolution which was proposed was, don't consider electron to be point particles, consider them as waves, not just any wave. Consider them as standing waves. What is a standing wave? If you take a string and clamp both ends and pluck it, what will happen? You can either do this or do this or do this. These are called standing waves. If you don't have any nodes, it is called the fundamental node, n is equal to 1. If you have one node, it is called the first harmonic. These are called overtones. If you have two nodes, this is called the second harmonic. These are called overtones, and this is called the fundamental. He said, why not think of electrons as waves? So if electron is a wave, please remember, this is the orbit. If positive charge center is here, now an electron is a wave, it's a standing wave. So wherever there is a constructive interference, okay, only that orbit is allowed, and this corresponds to one of the Bohr's orbits. Now since it is a standing wave, there is no question of acceleration. Why not every orbit is allowed? Because there are only few orbits in which there can be constructive interference of the waves at the ends. If there is an erratic orbit, then there will be a destructive interference and the wave will destroy itself. That is why this is where the constructive interference is, this is where the constructive interference is, this is where the constructive interference is. Not every orbit is allowed. That is why wherever the constructive interference happens, that becomes one of the Bohr's orbits. And you can see here that this is the in the center there is a nucleus. This is the first orbit, this is the first orbit, this is the second orbit, this is the third orbit. So these are waves. So this to a certain extent solve the problem that even though the atoms, electrons which are in the stationary states don't radiate energy, because if you take the view that electrons can be treated as waves, you don't have to worry about the standing waves, you don't have to worry about the acceleration. This is what was done. And who gave this proposal? A Frenchman by the name Louis de Broglie. How did he arrive at this conclusion is what we shall discuss. All of you know from your pre-university physics that if you consider light, light has a peculiar property. It can act both as a particle as well as a wave. There are few properties of light which can only be explained on the basis of particle nature. For example, rectilinear propagation is one. Reflection, refraction. Remember, reflection and refraction are explained on the particle nature of light. But there are few properties like interference, diffraction and polarization. They are explained only by the wave properties, right? If you consider, you can't explain diffraction by considering light to be composed of particles or corpuscles as they are called. Now the real question is what light really is. Is it a wave or a particle? So the answer which was given was it has dual characteristics. It has dual nature. It can be particle, it can be wave, depending on whichever experiment you are doing. This was the resolution, and this is famously known as dual nature of electromagnetic radiation. As you know, in the electromagnetic spectrum, light forms a part, so light is an electromagnetic radiation. Now, de Broglie's argument, while conceiving that electron can be thought of as a wave, based on this dual nature of light, and his argument is as follows. The whole energy in the universe, as far as physical world is concerned, comes in only two varieties. Either it is a matter like electron, or it is a electromagnetic radiation. Like matter is fundamental particles. Electron, it could be a quark, or it could be the other fundamental particles like that. It could be up quark, down quark and all. Otherwise, you have photons. You have photons of gamma rays, you have photons of visible light, everything. Okay. So they come basically in two varieties, which is matter and radiation. So what if you consider this electromagnetic radiation, they will have two guises. They will have two properties. They can behave like particles, they can behave like waves. So his argument was nature loves symmetry, hence if the electromagnetic radiation can manifest itself both as particles and waves, the same thing must be true with the matter also. And how did he prove it? His argument was very simple. He took two very famous equations which I told you previously, that E is equal to mc square, that same E is equal to h nu, and nu is the frequency, and frequency can be written as c by lambda. So he took this mc square, which is equal to E is also equal to mc square, that is also equal to h nu, and nu can be written as c by lambda. Mc square is equal to hc by lambda. So what is lambda? This c, one c gets cancelled with the other c, lambda is equal to h by mc. But this c is a special velocity. It is called the velocity of light. Okay, velocity of light is a very special velocity. In general, this c can be replaced with a v, which is general velocity. So if you replace this with v, h divided by mv. And what is mv? Mv, please remember, is momentum. Momentum is the product of mass and velocity. Okay, so lambda is equal to h divided by p. This is what de Broglie could come up with. So what is his hypothesis? His hypothesis says that every moving particle is associated with a wave of wavelength lambda is equal to h by p. It is very important to say every moving particle, otherwise v will be 0, lambda will be undefined, right. That is why he said every moving particle is associated with a wave. What is the takeaway from this? The takeaway is electron, if it is moving, it is a matter particle, if it is moving, this can be thought of as associated with a wave, just like your electromagnetic radiation acts both as particle and a wave. Electron can be thought of as both particle and a wave, and this is what is known as wave particle duality, right. So now by the laws of symmetry, and since this is a wave which is connected with matter, these are also called as matter waves, and this is what is famously known as de Broglie's hypothesis. And straight away we can calculate one of the consequences of this. We can easily calculate. Now consider an electron. If you have an electron between two electrodes, so I am applying a voltage V, and this is negative, let us say this is positive, okay. Electron is here. If electron, you know that positive and negative attract each other. So as soon as I switch this on, this is if I apply a voltage V, this will get attracted to the positive. So whenever it is in motion, what is the energy which is associated with motion? It is called the kinetic energy. So half mv square is the kinetic energy when it moves from here to here, and that kinetic energy is generated by applying V, which is the potential difference, and the charge of the electron. If it were not to be charged, it would not have got attracted. That is why E into V is the energy, kinetic energy acquired by the electron. With this equation, we can now calculate, if you consider electron as a point particle, what is the wavelength associated with it, and it is called de Broglie wavelength of an accelerated electron. This is the experimental setup, right. So half mv square is the kinetic energy acquired by the electron, acquired by the electron when it moves under a potential difference V, that is equal to charge of the electron and potential difference. So if you multiply m, if you multiply m and divide it by m, which does not alter the expression, the numerator will become m square v square divided by 2m. Why m square v square? Because we know that p is equal to mv. What is p square? P square is equal to m square v square, right. So this m square v square can be written as p square. So what is p square? If you cross multiply here, p square is equal to 2m ev. And what is p? It is square root of 2m ev, where m is the mass of the electron, e is the charge of the electron, v is the potential difference which is applied. And what is de Broglie hypothesis? Every material particle moving with a velocity v is associated with a wave. Here it is the electron. It is a material particle. What is the wavelength of that wave? It is given by lambda is equal to h divided by p. And what is the expression for p? If we just substitute it here, it will become h divided by square root of 2m ev. You know everything here except the voltage. Voltage is something which you can apply, but mass of the electron is fixed, charge of the electron is fixed. So if you do this calculation, h is 6.625 into 10 power minus 34 divided by square root of 2 into, this is the mass of the electron, 9.1 into 10 power minus 31 kg, and this one is the charge of the electron. If you do the calculation, you will end up with this. So lambda, the wavelength associated with an electron which is accelerated under a potential difference V, is given by this. So what does it mean? When an electron was usually thought to be a point particle. If it gets accelerated under a potential difference, according to de Broglie hypothesis, this electron can be thought of as a wave, as a matter wave of this wavelength. This is an example as to how to calculate the wavelength of electron under particular circumstances. So it is a very general principle which says that any material particle which is moving with a velocity v is associated with a wave whose whose wavelength is given by this one. Okay. So, this is a very, very important concept, and based on this further developments of quantum mechanics took place. Okay. This is called the, even though it is written as DEBROGLIE, it must be pronounced as de Broglie, not de Broglie. So, it is a French name, it must be pronounced as that. Okay. Let us now go to the parallel development which was happening. Okay. The next conceptual advance in quantum mechanics was quantum physics was taken by Heisenberg. He was addressing this question by doing a thought experiment, and thought experiment in is also called a Gedanken experiment. Gedanken is the German word for thought. So, he was addressing this question as to, if I want to see the electron, what are the conditions to see the electron? Let me elaborate on that. Suppose that if you take a copper block, all of us know that this copper block is composed of atoms. Okay, a regular array of atoms is what is there inside the copper. Okay, so these atoms are not continuous. All of us know there is first atom, this is the second atom, this is the third atom, and etc. etc. So, it is a huge array of copper atoms is what makes a copper crystal. Okay. Even though we know that these between any two copper atoms there is complete vacuum. Okay. When we see a copper block, we do not see it this way, we see this to be continuous. Why is it? The solution has to do with the wavelength of light which we use, and please remember, in a copper crystal or a copper block, the distance between any two copper atoms is 1 angstrom or 10 power minus 10 meter, right, 10 power minus 10 meter. But what is the wavelength of light which we are using to see this? Our visible wavelength is between 400 and 700 nanometer, or 4000 to 7000 angstrom. If you take the average, it will come out to be 5500 angstroms. What is the gap between these two? 1 angstrom, right. So, we are using a wave of wavelength, and wavelength is the distance between two consecutive crust and trough. We are using a wave of wavelength which is 5500 times bigger than the atomic distance. So, what happens when we use the wave, it will just surpass this. That is why we do not see two atoms to be separate when we use the ordinary light, because the atomic distance is very, very small compared to the light which we used to see. And what is the mechanism of seeing? The mechanism of seeing is photon has to go and hit, and it has to come back to our eye, then only we can see this. Now, in order to see this atomic distance, what you have to do? Now, you have to use a wavelength which is at least comparable to 1 angstrom. If you use any wavelength which is smaller or comparable to 1 angstrom, you can see. That is why in crystallography, to study the crystal structure, we use X-rays. Do you know why? It is because the wavelength of the X-rays are comparable to the atomic distances within a crystal. Now, Heisenberg was on this question that electron is a very small entity. There are no there are no microscopes to see the electron, but it was a thought experiment. If I want to see the electron, what suppose that what are the conditions in which I can see the electron? Suppose that the electron is here. Let us say I want to see the electron. Electron is very, very small. So, if I want to see a electron which is small, I need to bring in a wavelength which is at least comparable to the size of this. Since it is very small, I have to bring a very short wavelength wave to see this. How do you see this? The short wavelength has to hit this electron, it has to come back to you. This is how you see it. If I use a very, very short wavelength electron, it comes with a compromise. What is that? In the last video, I had told you that the energy is inversely proportional to the wavelength. Smaller the wavelength, higher will be the energy, right? So, now which is the smallest wavelength which you can think about is gamma ray. If I bring a gamma ray, it has the shortest wavelength, that is why it has the highest energy. What does it mean? It means in order to see the electron, I need to bring in a very, very short wavelength. Let's take it to be the gamma. Gamma has 10 power minus 14 meters. Okay. Since it has very small wavelength, it has very high energy. So now think of the consequence. I am bringing in a gamma ray. Initially the electron was here. Okay. When I shine my gamma ray source here, now remember gamma is very small wavelength. It has very high energy. So what will happen when you hit electron with very high energy? It will get displaced somewhere. So when it gets displaced somewhere, the velocity changes. When velocity changes, the momentum also changes. So his basic premise, his basic difficulty was in order to see an electron which is very small, I need to bring in a very high wavelength, a very small wavelength. Very small wavelength would mean that I am impinging a very high energy. When I impinge a very high energy, when it strikes, the electron initially was here, will not be here anywhere, it goes somewhere. Its momentum will be changed. Okay. If you want to, its momentum is instantly changed. By the time it comes back, its momentum would have been changed. But if you don't want, if you are not seeing the electron at all, it is wherever it is wherever it is, but you are not you are not sure of its velocity, right? So you are not sure where it is. That's why he makes this. This is the fundamental law of nature. He says, in any simultaneous determination of position and momentum of a particle, the product of the uncertainties. Uncertainty is delta x. What is uncertainty? To put it very, very roughly, it is statistically it is the standard deviation. What is called uncertainty? Watertight definition is the standard deviation, but you can take it to be the error. So the error which you have to commit, the product of the errors which you have to commit is greater than or equal to h divided by 4 pi. What is that h? H is the Planck's constant. So simultaneous determination is the key word here. You can determine position exactly at one point of time and momentum exactly at another point of time. But what this Jadankan experiment is saying, at the same time, you cannot have the knowledge of position and momentum with infinite accuracy. And how do you put it mathematically? This is delta x, uncertainty in position, uncertainty in momentum has to be greater than or equal to 4 pi, and this is what is known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. These are not the two variables which will agree uncertainty principle. There are other variables also. They are, in fact, they are called conjugate variables. But two famous examples of that is energy time uncertainty and angular momentum and angle uncertainty. We can extend the same definition. That in any simultaneous determination of energy and time, the product of the uncertainties has to be greater than or equal to h by 4 pi. In any simultaneous determination of angular momentum and angle, the product of uncertainties has to be greater than or equal to h divided by 4 pi. So this is a very, very important principle. It puts the limitation of how much we can know about a particular thing. And this is in complete contrast with the classical mechanics, because classical mechanics said, you give me the position now, you give me your velocity, I will completely tell you where the particle will be after a time t by using an equation. What this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle made was, it says I cannot simultaneously tell you the position and velocity. Now, how can I predict the future? Because there is a minimum error which I have to commit in both of them. So, if I cannot know it now, how can I predict the future? So, this classical description is called deterministic description. This one would become the probabilistic description, which becomes the very, very fundamental feature of classical quantum physics. That is because of the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. As one of the early applications of uncertainty principle, we can look into one of the major problems which was discussed. Then it is non-existence of electrons inside the nucleus. What is the definition of the problem? The problem was, Once you discover the radioactivity, remember radioactivity, if you have a radioactive nucleus, it spontaneously emits alpha, beta and gamma rays. This is alpha, this is beta and this is gamma. Gamma is an electromagnetic radiation, it is neutral, no problem. What is alpha? Alpha is positive. Helium nucleus is alpha, but beta is something which is very identical to an electron. So now the problem was, since we know that radioactivity is a nuclear activity and these beta particles are getting emitted from the nucleus, since beta is resembling completely an electron, question was whether the electrons are there inside the nucleus. If they are there, it is conceptually hugely problematic because nucleus, as we know, is the center of positive charge. If you have electrons inside that, then that would neutralize the positive charge. That was the problem, but this was the experimentally observed phenomenon which nobody could come up with a explanation for. This uncertainty principle solves the problem and says electrons cannot exist inside the nucleus. How does it do that? When you do an experimental measurement, this is, suppose that this is the beta particle, you measure its energy. The maximum energy of the beta particles is 4 million electron volt. What is electron volt? 1 electron volt is the kinetic energy acquired by the electron when it is accelerated under a potential difference 1 volt. Okay. So the maximum energy of a beta particle possible is 4 million electron volt. Please keep this in mind, we need it for the discussion further. Now, what we can do is we can apply uncertainty principle and show that electrons do not exist inside the nucleus. Now, this is the scheme. Suppose that you take the nucleus. Okay. If you take the nucleus, what is the diameter of the nucleus? The diameter of the nucleus is given by this 10 power minus 14 meter. If electrons existed really inside the nucleus, it could have come from here, it could have come from here, it could have come from here, anywhere. The maximum uncertainty or the error, roughly speaking error you could have committed where the electron would have come from is the diameter. Because the electron could have come from here, you could have assumed it having come from here. So the maximum error which is possible is the diameter. So that is delta x. And we know from the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the product of delta x and delta px is greater than or equal to h divided by 4 pi. So when you know the maximum uncertainty which can happen in the position, it is very easy to calculate delta p. And what is delta p? If you cross multiply delta x, h divided by 4 pi into delta x. What is h? 6.625 into 10 power minus 14 minus 34. I am sorry. So 4 into 4 pi is 3.14 into 10 power minus 14. So px, which is uncertainty in momentum, is greater than or equal to 5.275 into 10 power minus 21 units. This is the uncertainty in, if this is the uncertainty in position, this is the uncertainty in momentum. But what should we compare? We know the energy of the beta particle which is coming out of the nucleus. Okay. Now we will take that energy. What is that energy? Energy is equal to half mv square. All of you know it is half mv square. If you multiply and divide by m, this becomes m square divided by, since half, multiply by m, this will become m square v square divided by m. So what is m into v? That is p. That's why it will become E should be greater than or equal to p square divided by 2m. What is p? We will put this value here. This value is put here, and if you calculate p square by 2m, where m is the mass of the electron, you will get this quantity. Now we have that quantity in electron volts. That's why in order to convert this joule into electron volt, we will divide it by 1.6 into 10 power minus 13 minus 19. This would make this as 95.45 mega electron volt. greater than or equal to. Even if I take the equation, it is almost equal to 95 electron volt. It can be greater, but the minimum energy if electrons existed inside the nucleus would have been 95 million electron volt. But what is the maximum value of the beta? The maximum value did not exceed 4 million electron volt. So, what does it prove? If electrons existed inside the nucleus, the minimum energy it would have carried is this, but the beta particles maximum energy is this. There is a clear disparity between the two. That is why electrons do not exist inside the nucleus. This is one of the applications of uncertainty principle, and this principle together with the de Broglie hypothesis created the entire field of quantum physics. Okay. So, I think we will stop at this point.